Hi, welcome to the Basement Lab podcast. I'm Russ Piercy, here mostly to ask questions because I am the least scientifically capable in the room.
I'm Sebastian, still raising my hand. Don't know why. I'm on the same boat with Russ, even though I'm a scientist. I'm not too familiar with this one, so I'm here to ask questions and sound like a fool at times.
I'm Jordan. I am a mammologist and I do have a background in animal sciences. This is not my area of expertise, but I do know a little bit about it. But we also have a special guest panelist today.
Hi, I'm Erica. I got a degree in genetics and genomics, so I hopefully will help answer most of the genetics aspects of these questions.
Resident expert.
Yeah. All right, so we are discussing pet cloning. I don't know if that actually got brought up earlier, but we are looking at the science and then later on the philosophy and ethics behind cloning your pet. Real quick, pet cloning has been around for well over a decade. Actually, we're getting close to 15 years now, with the first pets being cloned in the mid 2000s. This was a direct result of the cloning of Dolly the sheep, which caused a lot of stir a long time ago. But we will go over how your pet is cloned, where it can be done, the cost, and then we'll get into a whole bunch of other things. So real quick, a pet that is cloned. You're typically going to see this being a dog, a cat, or a horse. We were not able to find any information on horses other than that it's possible and it's happened. Almost all the information is on dogs or cats. If you want to read articles, primary literature is out there, but we suggest secondary literature unless you are a geneticist. You can find articles about this in the Scientific American, the MIT Review, the New York Post, and IO9. So go look up those articles if you are interested. Yes.
And in the comments, please leave any fake New York Post headlines for pet cloning that you may wish.
That could be interesting. All right, so real quick, we're going to have Erica explain what she can about the cloning process, just because it'll probably be better than my For Idiots version. So,
And I'm going to bombard you with several questions following.
Okay, so basically, what you're doing with cloning is, unfortunately, most people like to think of cloning as a specific copy at any point in time of a pet. So if I had my cat and my cat passes away, you need to get genetic material from them very quickly. So that would be a lot of times they use cheek swabs from the inside of the mouth, anything that has skin cells, and they can take those cells, or they do pieces of tissue from abdomens and things like that. And what they will do is they will cell culture these and basically replicate those cells, and they're going to use a nucleus of a embryo and put your animal cells into that embryo that has no genetic material. So you're basically starting with the genetic material of your cat when it passes away.
and these are stem cells, correct?
Correct.
That way they can be anything.
Exactly. So, and then those, when a stem cell means it can go on and become any cell. It is not genetically defined to be a skin cell or a lung cell or an eye cell or any cell in your body, because you have to think about it. There's the same genetic material in every single cell in your body, but depending on what the cell is programmed to do, it goes off and does different things, and different things are transcribed from your DNA to be proteins that go off and do multiple things. So basically make them stem cells so they're not pre-programmed to do any one thing. And those are what are put into an embryo, and then the embryo is then put into a host animal. Any cat or dog can be a host animal. It doesn't have to be the same breed or anything like that. And so they're basically, they're not grown in a test tube or in a vial somewhere. They're, born in a normal animal. And then what you get out is an animal at birth that has the same genetic code as your original animal. But they're only genetically similar as a twin. So, if you have an identical twin, I have identical twin sisters, they share genetic material, but you incur differences over time, right? So every time your cell divides, or, as you grow as an embryo, you have a chance for things not to divide correctly, or there to be differences, or changes over time. So yeah, they're more like 99.999% identical. And it's pretty much as close as you can get. It's the same creature. But I would say the cloning is more like a twin than an exact copy.
So keep in mind, it is not the exact same creature. It is a different creature, just with the closest genetic match that can possibly exist. And that also it takes 3 animals to get this individual. Your original pet, then the egg donor, and then the carrier. So it takes at least 3 different animals to get your pet back. And when you get your pet back, again, it's going to just be a genetic copy. So any personality traits are going to be different. It has the same basic blueprint, but this is where you can really see nature versus nurture. Unless it is raised the exact same way with the exact same conditions, it will be different personality. That's just the way personality works. So here's where you can see a prime example of nature versus nurture causing an influence. Same thing has been done with genetically identical twins that have been split at birth, which actually happens a lot more commonly throughout history than we would probably like to admit. But scientists have gone back, especially in the mid-19 and early 1900s. A lot of studies were done on twins raised in different environments and how both physically and mentally and emotionally they were different, even though genetically identical. Yes?
Quick question, just because I feel like this has been in the news because of the Barbara Streisand article a couple weeks ago, has put it kind of back in the news cycle, where she talked about her decision to clone her pets.
Yes.
And what she described is that she had 5 dogs as a result of the process. And so, having read it, I was a little unclear about a few things. So I just wanted to ask some follow-up questions as kind of an entry point. The first thing would be, one of them died. One of the pets died. One of the clones. Is the process a little bit different in terms of the stability of the birthing process and their ability to survive long term? And the second question I'd ask is, so are those 4 identical twins even within?
So yeah, they're all 4 identical twins, and the reason that we don't just do one embryo and say, okay, we're going to have one clone is sometimes the eggs don't attach to the uterine wall correctly. Sometimes, they might incur a mutation as they're growing that isn't viable for life. These are all things that naturally occur when any litter, or that's why sometimes there's only 2 puppies, sometimes there's 7. But that doesn't mean there wasn't only 7 eggs released or 2 eggs released. It just means that those ones might not have been viable for life. They get reabsorbed into the mother. So to hedge our bets, most cloning facilities are doing multiple embryos implanted so that they get one shot, they get as many clones as possible for the client. Another thought to think about too, going back to what Jordan said, is that while there are some characteristics that these people are reporting that are similar to their clone or the original dog. So they're like, oh, my clone dog does the exact same thing that my original dog does. So there are probably some characteristics or mannerisms or things that animals and people do that are genetic. Teasing those out is incredibly difficult because how do you control for behavior? In a lot of tests, it's really hard to do. So there might be mannerisms that you'll get back when you clone an animal. Another thing to think about is the same with a twin. My twin sisters do not look exactly the same. You can tell them apart. So when you get these cloned animals, you're going to have visible differences. So let's say if you cloned a Dalmatian, right? You're not going to get the same spot pattern across all the clones, because the way that melanocytes migrate when they make colored patterns on coats and skin is that it's very variable, and you're not going to have like, oh look, my spotted Dalmatian looks like all of them. So that might be disappointing for someone who doesn't realize they're not going to have like an exact copy.
So, question that I have, and this stems back from Dolly, and I could be remembering this wrong just because it's been so long ago and I was relatively young. From my understanding of cloning is, if you take, say, your dog that's 15 years old and starts to develop cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and you start cloning him, this new dog, yes, will be a puppy when born, but his genetic makeup will be 15, technically, years old. And they're more susceptible to illnesses at a physical younger age, even though their genes are not.
I actually saw an article about this where for the first viable part of life, and for every species that'll be different, that actually is not a concern,
Okay.
because many cancers and diseases still take time to develop. and occur after certain either mistakes are made or start codons are activated or stop codons are activated. And so it might be like, oh, they will eventually develop lung cancer, but it takes 20 years to develop. You know that they're going to get lung cancer in 20 years,
Okay.
but it still might take that amount of time.
So yeah, he's
But-
correct.
yeah.
So if you think of it this way, with any genetic disease, we won't be able to eliminate that. So if a dog died of, cardiac disease that was inherited, you're still going to have that in the clone pet because it's something that's genetic. Cancers, the way cancers works, I like to think of them is you have a bunch of safeguards and you were born with one broken. So let's say 3 things means I'm going to have cancer. You were born with one already broken. So you have 2 things in your body that are already trying to fix that system from becoming cancer. But over time, with sun, radiation, x-rays, anything you go through in life, you incur genetic mutations. Oh, another one's broken. Oh, another one's broken. Now I have cancer. So if you're born with something that is probably going to lead to having cancer, you're kind of already born with one of your fail-safes to prevent cancer already broken. So I don't know if you would want to stay away from any tissues that already had cancer. So if you had a dog that, had lung cancer, we're not going to use a piece of that already genetically messed up lung to clone from it. But yeah, I'd have to really think about that because, it makes sense what you're saying, right? That if we take a 15-year-old dog, he has his, genome at that time has all the mutations that he's incurred throughout his lifetime. So by putting that into an embryo, are we just adding to that, and will we see an animal that doesn't live as long?
Would it be best then to get your puppy and save a genetic sample from that puppy
I don't know if we've done enough
versus
of
your
this.
15-year-old dog?
Yeah, I don't know if we've done enough of this to see if there is, there's only been a few hundreds of animals cloned at this point. I don't know if we've done enough of them to say, oh, they die early. That we should be collecting, DNA
I think
early on.
from what I read is
Dolly.
there were 2 main companies that do this for profit. One is Suom in Korea, and they brag to have something like 700 pets under their belt.
More
And
than I
then
thought.
Biogen in the U.S. claims to have something like 300 to 500 under their belt. So we're still
We're in the 1,000 range.
we're in
Yeah.
the low thousands, which
It's a good representative sample.
it is a good representative sample, but then when you're dealing with things like genetics, then you're looking at things like medical biology, in which case we jump from a 95 confidence interval to a 99 confidence interval because it's medical, genetics being medical. So at 1,000, you're still actually not necessarily at a greatest point for a 99 confidence.
Are they saying that those are all 1,000 pet cases? Because from what I understood earlier, they clone more than one.
Yes.
Ooh, good
So
Yeah.
is it 1,000 or is it really
I-
6,000?
I think it's 700 pets delivered.
Okay.
Okay. So it's
Is-
less actual.
So it'd be more actual animals cloned, 700 delivered.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I read one case of a man who had his dog who hadn't passed away yet, but was getting really old, cloned, and 2 of them, they had 2 viable clones born, and he took both of them. So.
And this will bring up, we'll discuss this in a little bit, but some ethical discussions about what happens to the other clones. Because that can get kind of horrible. So,
Yeah, I didn't see what.
we'll stay away from that for the moment and just keep on the biology for now.
Yeah.
So as far as I can tell, we've only really been able to do this with mammalian species, even though in the meantime, in the last 15 years, we've unlocked several genomes that are not just mammalian.
Mm-hmm.
I guess just the demand has not been there for reptilian and avian species, plus there already are some reptilian species that clone anyway.
Holy crap. Are you telling me Jurassic Park can happen?
We're getting there because.
You could make a chimera.
Yeah. Jurassic Park is ridiculous genetically. It's
Yeah.
never going to happen. But
Wow.
Yes.
Wait, never.
So, like, the chimeras from, like, fantasy or, like, Full Metal Alchemist, things like that, that's never going to happen. But you could actually kind of already do a genetic chimera. It's just different
We
than
kind of
what people
already
think.
do it.
Yeah.
So has anyone ever seen like the
Two-faced cat.
Two-Face? Well, okay. Or Mr. Green Genes? So was a cat that they put a gene that makes you glow in the dark. Basically, it's something that's in like
Jellyfish.
jellyfish, exactly.
Yep.
And so they put it in the cat, and you can do that. It's actually now it's
I
called
think
a
Mizzou
knock-in.
has a oxalotl.
Mizzou has done some research into that, yeah.
And its bones are glow in the dark. So if you stick a UV flashlight, you
Mhm.
can see its bone structure.
Yeah, and same thing with the cat, except it was in its skin cells. So literally, like if you help.
So
Flash
while
it to
this
it.
may seem like scientists doing something just because it's cool, and it is really cool, there actually are medical and genetic reasons why this research is done.
Absolutely.
And it is for things like cancer research, for things like genetic disease research.
And a lot of times the glowing is actually just a way to know that whatever we tried to put into the cell worked, right? So we can't tell if we wanted to make a change to make eliminate, let's say, cancer or something like that. If we might put that tag of also being glow in the dark on there, so we know that it worked.
Yeah.
So is it also for publicity reasons? Because I know it's hard to get research. I'm
Doesn't
just
hurt.
asking pragmatically.
So you bring this up, and this is actually a painful point of contention among scientists, is that scientists, by their nature, both want to collaborate and do the most discovery they can, but also want to figure it out themselves. And that's just personality traits. Like, we want to figure it out because we're curious, and we want to work with other people to figure it out, but we want to. The problem is in modern America, there are very limited funding sources, and so you have to keep everyone else in the dark and then come out with the big flashy research to get that money. And that's actually not the way to promote science learning, because we're not helping each other, and you do have to do sometimes stupid, crazy things to get money to actually do the thing that you should be doing in the first place.
I clearly touched a nerve. I was just
Yeah.
curious
No,
on
I mean
the
it's
pragmatic.
a very realistic problem with science. So like the lab that I used to work for, our main focus was looking at the genetic problems and health conditions in cats and things that were also related to humans. So things like polycystic kidney disease, which is also in humans. There's no cure. Blindnesses, but we would also work on silly things like the inheritance of cat coat colors, because then we could get breeders to donate money. So like it's a trade-off of things that are flashy and interesting that get picked up in the news and things that are actually like really helpful in the long run.
So the next question I'd have is, we mentioned the two private research, or not research, they're not research. They're for profit, like we're going to clone your pet to make money.
Yep.
How widespread is this in terms of research?
So in the U.S., we have IRBs, which thanks Stanford. But no, actually, we do need IRBs, because then things like the Tuskegee experiments happen again. But we have IRBs that limit the ethical and moral realms that science can work in.
Tell them what an IRB is.
That's an internal review board or internal research board, which basically says your work is ethical and moral, or your work is unethical or unmoral, and you can kind of guess which one you have to be in order for the research to go forward. That's why they exist, is to say, we've done a lot of shitty things to people in the past for centuries, not just America. I mean, Nazi Germany advanced science a whole lot because they didn't have IRB, and thank God we'll never have to replicate those experiments again, because they're horrific. United States has a very, very bad history of screwing people over without letting them know. But anyway, an IRB says your research is ethical or unethical. So we have a lot to do with ethical restrictions placed because we were a Judeo-Christian country. So there are a lot of Judeo-Christian values placed on what we can and cannot do with science. There are other countries around the world that do not have those in place. And so in the US, we do have cloning research, but it's very small and limited.
It is very small and it's very limited, and I would argue that it's not being done on primates at all, because to us that's not ethical, and we aren't at a point to have that discussion, whereas other countries like China are already doing it.
Yes.
So we're actually falling behind in the advancement in that research because of our ethical limitations and our not wanting to open that can of worms. So there's not a lot going on. In other animals, like cat, anything we consider a pet because we own them. We don't give them the same rights as primates. There's a lot of probably research going on those. I can think of, quite a few genomic studies that are going on with those kind of animals and creating new embryos and new life, which would be cloning-esque, but it's definitely not having anything remotely human, not in this country.
And so Erica brought it up about primates. So the first primates cloned were actually reported earlier this year in Science. And it was reported in January 2018. So two scientists that are claiming, of course, it's a lab of dozens, if not hundreds. But the Chinese Academy of Sciences have successfully cloned two macaque monkeys in late 2017 and reported the results earlier this year. So you can see somewhere like China, they are advancing it. Somewhere like Korea, where dogs and cats aren't even considered pets, you can see that's why they have one of the largest labs. It's because they can. And, research is, and Dolly the sheep was cloned in Scotland, not the U.S. So.
Well, I mean, we have a big problem even here with stem cells. So cloning is really not on the board for most researchers in this country at all. It doesn't get past IRB.
Yep.
So what is an IRB board? Who consists of the actual IRB
Depends on the university.
Yeah, a lot of times it can be just, it might just be all of the professors of that school, or it might just be like, here are 4 experts, or it might be, here are some outside people brought in to look at it. So every school is different.
It depends on the school. Sometimes they have people that they specifically hire to be on an IRB. Sometimes they have rotating professorships do this. It depends. Yeah. But they are all reviewed by more than one person. Anything doing with an animal goes under extreme scrutiny, no matter what the experiment, and it has to be approved at the IRB level for any kind of, just even housing an animal on campus has to be approved, and how you house them. So.
Yeah, I have, I don't know how many hours of training in animal welfare and care, and I interact with wild animals that I don't bring back to the lab. I handle them in wild and release them. People that bring animals back to the lab and things like that have, even 2 or 3 times the amount of hours of training than I do, and I have a significant number, and I have to get re-upped every other year to make sure my certifications are valid. And then, once you've done all that, then you still have to get your IRB approved. So.
Side question. Gestation period is all the same, right, as normal, I shouldn't say normal, a unique pet, right? So.
Yeah. It's still growing from the same spot as a naturally.
So this would not be a viable, say, 20 years down the line when there's a food shortage, we can just start cloning to mass produce food.
I mean, honestly, you're going to be able to have more animals born the natural way.
Yeah.
So.
It's more extensive to do it the other way.
This might be a tangent, but I was also under the impression that they were essentially growing meat in the lab.
That is a different thing, and it's not cloned meat; it's grown meat.
Grown meat, yeah.
So wouldn't that be more effective?
Yeah,
Depending on how hard it is to do. I don't know anything about that.
I've watched videos of scientists eating the food, and apparently it tastes terrible, but it is nutritionally valid. So, I mean, at least we're not doing a whole Soylent Green thing yet.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't know Soylent Green, go watch the movie, then you'll know. It's a great movie.
Grown as the company Soylent uses that cheekily, and you just
Yep.
wonder why.
Yeah. It's actually a real company, which I find hilarious.
Yeah, I use it to replace some of my lunches as a teacher.
Nice. All right, so we have discussed some of the biology. We could now, and we've hit on some of the ethics and philosophy behind it. So let's go ahead and jump into that realm. So.
Well, first off, given the price, right? So if it's a cat, it's 25 to, what did we say, 25?
25,000 for a cat
Here in the
plus
US,
genetic
right?
storage.
Damn good cat.
Right? I mean, I love my cat, but that's still a lot of money.
And
Is it
also-
a class issue then? So
Yeah,
most
so-
of the high profile
Exactly.
cases are like Barbara Streisand in the
Uh-huh.
news, or these people that have
Money to
significantly
burn.
more means.
Well, and remember the point that Sebastian brought up earlier of, would it be best to take a younger dog or cat and get that material? Sure, but these companies know that, and they charge to store that genetic material until you want to use it.
If
So then you have
yeah.
storage fees on top of it.
Yeah, so if I have a cat and I want to have it as a kitten, 4 weeks old, take a genetic sample, say they charge X amount of dollars a month, a year,
Yeah,
I think it's by year.
Yeah.
15, 20 years down the line, till
Yep.
Mr. Fluffy dies,
Uh-huh.
So you are paying for
plus
the
the
initial.
30K to clone Mr. Fluffy.
So you're paying the initial genetic culture, then you are paying the storage fee, and then you are paying the $25,000 to clone it.
Yeah.
Let's not forget, probably there's insurance costs in here somewhere. There's always insurance costs.
Probably, yeah, too.
A dog in the U.S. is $50,000. If you go to the one in Korea, a dog is $100K.
Yeah, Korea is more expensive, 50 for a cat and 100 for a dog. And I mean, they're probably getting it because people, I don't. But
Is it a reputation thing in Korea?
they've been doing it longer.
Yeah, they're one of the originals, and they're still in business. So
So you brought up earlier saying that you can put the embryo in any breed.
Correct.
So if I wanted to clone a Cocker Spaniel and I put it in a German Shepherd, the puppy would come out as a Cocker Spaniel. It would not look remotely like a German Shepherd.
Correct, because it's a donor egg and donor DNA that goes into the nucleus of the embryo is Cocker Spaniel, so putting it into a German Shepherd should have no effect on it. It should just come out.
those cells have already formed and are then being transplanted in.
Yeah.
So it's not even going to have the mitochondrial DNA
Yeah.
of the mother because it's already a formed cell. So
I mean, there's some research that says that that the mother actually takes up some DNA from her offspring, but I don't know what impact that would have on a different breed. I mean, because they're all dogs. I mean, they're just, physically different, but I mean, they're genetically, they're not like, they can interbreed a Cocker Spaniel and a German Shepherd, and you'll still get a puppy.
So there's less separation between dog breeds than there are between human races, and human races really aren't a real thing.
No.
So the dog breeds are just given 2 or 3 generations, you go back to dog.
Yeah.
And then I guess next question, since we're on the whole ethics and morality stuff, might as well talk about playing God. If my cat has cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that my next clone cat will have cancer, can we somehow try to alter the genes so Mr. Fluffy 2.0 doesn't have cancer?
I mean,
Or-
not on the.
Maybe change a physical trait, like I really
Not on
hated
the.
that my cat had brown fur. I wish it had black fur. Can I
Not
make that
on
happen?
the. It's being done in research and things, not like brown and black fur, but that we're trying. I know there's a group working on trying to make a hyperallergenic cat, so they're trying to knock out what makes people allergic to cats, which is actually just a protein in their saliva. But there's things that researchers are working on changing, but it's not available to consumers to go up and be like Gattaca and be like, I want a kid with or a cat with blue eyes and my old cat Fluffy's personality. That's not being readily.
Well, and you actually kind of stumbled on why it's also not occurring so much is people are very worried that this is going to become genetic manipulation for human children.
Yes.
And that is a very legitimate concern that several groups have on this type of research. Honestly, should we do some research into it? Yes, we should. Do they have legitimate concerns about that can be used to basically kind of do population manipulation? Yep, certainly can. So again, that's why you need to have very strict ethical controls over what goes on.
And I think people forget, like, the genetics is not, besides physical, and some physical attributes, genetics is not a sealed deal, right? So let's say you're predisposed to be obese genetically, right? But let's say you're an athlete and you run all the time and you eat right, you're never going to be obese. Like, your genetics only takes you so far. Environment is also a big factor. So when people are always, like, I want to, program my kid to have these attributes, one of the things that's kind of wrong with Gattaca is that, and you kind of see that, if any of you guys seen the movie Gattaca, genetics students makes you watch it like 100 times. But it's basically the whole premise of the movie is a man who has um, wasn't genetically selected to have certain traits, and so they wanted, in this era, they're selected to be smart and strong and fast and athletic and perfect human beings, and he was born the old natural way, which has fallen out of fashion at this point in this movie. And he overcomes the odds because genetically he's not supposed to be able to do all of these things, and he wants to be an astronaut. And so in the movie he goes on and does these things even though he has like a heart condition that should prevent him. And the argument is that your genetic code doesn't define who you are. You can train or do these things to overcome the things that you are genetically predisposed for. Of course, there are instances where that's not true, but I wouldn't say that just because my genetics says this, that is how I'm going to be. It's not like a printed sheet of instructions.
Right. It's the difference where we've seen two genetically identical clones raised in different environments turn out very different. The nature versus nurture.
Yep.
Both can only do so much. Nature can only do so much to you, and environment can only do so much to you, and it's the interplay between the two.
Well, it's exact, and then the counter argument's true. You could have, nothing in your genetics that tells you you're going to be obese, but you have lived a lazy lifestyle and eat too many calories a day, and you gain weight over time.
Yeah.
So it goes both directions.
But I think what that movie does, if we're using it as an analogy to talk about this, is go into the ethical concern that Jordan brought up, and that they create a caste system around who has been genetically altered and who hasn't. So if you haven't been genetically altered, you're just literally not, opportunities are not technically available to you.
Yeah.
And it gets into some of the ethical concerns there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think by cloning animals, we're just getting that one step closer, right? Because eventually this is going to be a concern. We've argued that we're talking about pets, so we don't argue who owns that genetic code. We do, because they're our pets and we own them. But if you're a twin and you want to have, an organ of yours cloned, what right do you have to that 99.99% of your genome that's identical with your twin? So you have some ramifications of like, do you own your own DNA? Does anyone else have, any say in what you do? Do your parents have any say in like your genetic code? And can they sequence you? Can they clone you if they like him? This is my perfect child. I want another one exactly like him.
And this stuff is already being brought up today on human genome with 23andMe, and I forget some of the other ones. That's just the one that Ancestry and
yeah.
DNA and all that. Is because here's a little known fact on some of you that are getting your DNA sequence, is if you read the fine print, they legally can sell your genetic information. They actually legally are allowed to sell it to insurance companies, to advertising companies. You have no say in that, and so you are giving very private information about yourself to them so that they can like, oh yeah, we know this about you. But now everyone can know that about you.
I think what's interesting is it has spawned a lot of conspiracy theories and other things because it's hit kind of a nerve within people, that fear of being modified or like evaluated and making all these determinations. What I think is really interesting though is going beyond those private companies, as like medical records and other things start to be digitized, and we're having all these privacy concerns. Like Facebook is saying, we're not responsible for when people steal your information from us. And you have all these other concerns that it becomes, well, if I want to participate in the future of the American healthcare system, am I also giving up my DNA to potentially dangerous issues?
Yeah. And that's also, these companies are selling it to make a profit, and you have no say in that. And then you bring up the fact that I actually just had this discussion with some friends where the digitization and sharing of your medical records across hospitals and doctors is great. It's going to save lives. But there also comes a caveat of all it takes is one rogue doctor or nurse to look up your profile illegally. All it takes is one hacker to gather your information illegally. It's not even people wanting to be vicious or malicious. It's just happenstance. And so you have companies actively selling it, and then you have a congregation of your data, and then what risk does it pose being there? Imagine if they have all of the genetic data. Insurance companies might be like, we know that you have a 75% probability chance of getting cancer. We will not cover you. Bye.
So before we get too far down the conspiracy rabbit hole,
Yeah.
With 23andMe, before people stop, like, they do good, as concerning as they are, that they could potentially do bad, and that they do use a lot of that data collected from literally hundreds of people who send in their thousands now of people that have sent in their samples to help human research.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they're using the SNP data that they're collecting to do that. But yes, at the same time, they can sell that data to insurance companies, which to me is scary. That's one of the reasons, like, I don't know, this university has a program where you can, like, health monitoring, and, you know, you're supposed to, like, track your steps and send it in, and, you know, insurance companies buy that stuff up right and left, because if they can prove you're unhealthy, they can charge you more. But it's the same thing with your genetic code, but if they can prove you're unhealthy, they can charge you more. So I do believe, I could be wrong, I do believe when 23andMe sells any outside data, any of the data to any companies, they can't enclose your name. But any other information that they have, your age, your sex, you tell them all kinds of things when you do that. And then, of course, anything that's on their panel can go onto a company, and there's some things on that panel like Alzheimer's, and there's, you know, propensity for being obese, there's propensity for doing all kinds of different health factors, and yeah, absolutely, insurance companies are probably buying that up right and left.
So it's not more for sake of saying, oh, Sebastian has Alzheimer's in his, you know, in his family tree or whatever. It's saying that because 23andMe did this study, 75% of people can have Alzheimer's. So because we're getting a new client, there's a 75% chance he could have Alzheimer's. We should jack up his rates.
So you can see that we're really afraid of how they're going to use it, right? So right now they're probably looking at different demographics, like this group of people are more likely to have Alzheimer's. You know, if they fall into this category on our questionnaire, we should probably charge them more because they might get Alzheimer's, right?
Okay.
We're kind of worried that they're going to use data that way. That's probably how they're using it. That would be the smart way to use it. Another way we're worried they're going to use it is going, oh, we have Sebastian's information. We know that he has a 25% more increased likelihood than the average person of getting Alzheimer's. We are definitely going to charge him more because we know that. And what right do they have to know that? You know, because you might not ever have never have Alzheimer's.
A
Increased
chance
risk
is not a guarantee.
Yeah, increased risk does not guarantee, like, you might never have it.
Because
Like-
otherwise the lottery would be amazing.
Exactly. So, you
Going
know,
off the grid.
yeah.
All right, so bringing it back to pets and some of the ethical things with pets, is some of this is going to be, you know, emotional manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
We can clone your dog for the low price of $50K. Isn't your dog worth that? My initial response is yes and more. But that's an emotional response. I don't have $50,000 to clone my dog, even if he is the best dog in the world, and he is
Yeah.
worth it. But I don't have that, and that's, you know, emotional manipulation, and that is horrendously unethical.
Is it though?
Oh yeah.
But if you look at it, what we're seeing is emotion is starting to matter more in terms of how we think about ethics on a national level. So you're coming at this from the perspective of a scientist, and I was reminded on NPR the other day, and I don't want to get too far off the tangent, so you can cut this if you need to.
Okay.
That's my disclaimer. But they had one of the guys that was a key figure in the Reagan and Bush administrations who was talking about that it's cool to say all these things about ethics, but your emotion should inform like your idea of what ethics are.
Well, so just ethics in the viewpoint of a scientist is that as a scientist, I think that science itself should not have any ethics or morals. It is science, it is a process. The scientist, the person conducting the research, and the society they live within are the ones duty bound to have morals and ethics. Whatever their moral and ethic code is, it's going to be different than mine. Everyone's going to be different. So I view it as the science itself should have no moral or ethical restrictions. It is science. But the person, the individual, the scientist, and the culture they live with are the ones who have the responsibility of defining what is moral and ethical. And if we decide right now we have a limited amount of emotion in it, if we decide in the future that emotion should play more, then I can't really argue with that, because that's how it should progress, as, you know, what we
But
view it.
isn't that what you were just kind of frustrated with earlier with the Institutional Review Board? where it's a bunch of people who are influencing it that are not looking at it probably from a science perspective. They're looking at it from a different perspective.
Oh, I have nothing wrong with the IRB. I think it's absolutely needed.
But there's this, I sensed at least frustration with the fact that we don't have as much research in the United States because of the additional.
I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, it is frustrating that we can't do anything with, because of the way that stem cells and cloning is viewed, and because we live in a Christian nation historically, that it is viewed that it is something that is unethical. Because not every scientist, or maybe even a big proportion of scientists, believe that it is unethical, but it's a majority rule. So I think that maybe, I mean, my frustration is because I think that there should be more research in it, because there might really help mankind, and we're falling behind as a country in the scientific realm. But I mean, there are instances where it's vastly needed. I think that there's, I mean, if you look at the history of some of the research that was gone on in humans, even in like psychology, and just like, you know, if you read anything on like
Stanford Prison Experiment is
Yeah.
the exact reason we have the IRB.
yeah,
Oh,
these
yeah,
things that
it's-
were just like awful, and like things we did to babies, like just like things that we did to like
Things we did to
Yeah.
minorities.
minorities. I mean,
Oh.
these are things that I'm very happy are in place. I just think that, you know, my frustration just stems from a difference in probably beliefs and behind the resistance against cloning. But I mean,
And you know, like we said, China's doing it.
yeah.
So somewhere in the world, I could go to China
Yeah, exactly.
and start working in a lab there.
Yeah.
Like, might be a little bit difficult for me to get all the visas and everything, but I could go do that. If I were really motivated enough to do it, I could.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing two different cultures having two different moral and ethical values on the limitations of their science.
Yes.
And so that's why I said, but there's also a lot of horrendous things that occur in Chinese research. Because they don't have the same moral and ethical. We view them as horrendous, they don't.
Yep.
We do some things that they probably view as horrendous. It's just a difference in culture.
Culture. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's, I mean, IRB should, like I said, the scientists should be in step with the culture around them.
I have a question for you two. So do you guys have pets?
Yes,
What do you got? Cats, dogs?
Cocker Spaniel.
Okay, so if you could clone your Cocker Spaniel, what do you have?
Okay.
Yeah. So if you could clone your cat, how does that make you feel about, you know, you spend, let's say you had the money and that you could justifiably spend the money, because I still think that's a class problem with this, but, you know, if you could justifiably spend that money and clone your pet, knowing that a clone is not an exact copy. I think that that's a hard thing that people don't understand, but let's say you did understand and you still wanted one anyway. What does that say for all, I mean, we all both know that there's hundreds of thousands of dogs and cats and kennels and in, you know, shelters right now looking for homes. Like,
And this
Is
is
it-
the base ethical question that comes up when this is discussed
Yeah.
every time is, you know,
we have enough animals without homes. Why are we literally making them? You know, then when, yeah, I mean, your cat is special, but everything dies. So you can't, are we just going to keep recreating that same animal? I mean, I'm against it, obviously, because so I feel like I'm biasing the question itself. But
I don't think even if I had the expendable income, I would go about that process. Just because my cat was a stray, and I gave him a better life. So after his X amount of years, if he passes away, I know that I gave him a full life, and it might be my time to maybe give another creature an opportunity. So I wouldn't.
I think that we should go forward in cloning research, and I think that people that want to do this, whatever, if I could get a guarantee of getting Goblin, my dog, my exact dog, Goblin, alive again, I would take it. I would spend any amount of money, but I'm not. That's not possible.
it's not possible.
So because I cannot get my exact dog, I don't think it's worth it, and I don't necessarily agree that it's unethical, but I don't think it's ethical either. There are so many animals that need
So
rescuing.
are you in love with your dog Goblin, the personality, or are you in love with your dog Goblin, the physical appearance?
The personality.
Because what if we say we throw an altered carbon twist into this, and we were able to upload your dog's subconscious?
Then
and we
like I
threw
said,
it-
I would
then
throw
we
all
threw
the
it
money.
into a Dalmatian.
I would, like I said, I would
you
throw
still
all
love
the money at
Goblin
it.
the Dalmatian
Yes,
instead of
I would be.
Goblin whatever.
I would
money
be
you
throwing
have?
wads of cash at people. Shut up and take my money.
But
Okay.
if we threw it subconscious into a computer program, what would you do?
It would be a dog. It would be a computer program.
What if we put it in a computer dog? It would be a robot dog.
I can't scratch behind the ears on a computer.
Tamagotchi, or whatever those are.
Yeah. So,
I think where we're getting at here is a split between wanting the physical animal or wanting your subconscious of
Yeah,
your
And that
of your
goes to
animal.
the original Barbara Streisand premise, and that she literally said I had trouble finding my breed of dog that had the curly hair that I wanted out of a dog, and that was my main reason for cloning him.
So
Yeah.
she wanted the physical.
and at that point,
Yes.
you're just taking a shortcut on breeding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And is it really, again, if you want to waste your money doing that, more power to you. But
Yeah.
honestly, we could probably do that in a lab in 2 generations.
The only
So-
ethical thing I find concerning with pet cloning is that people don't understand. I'm worried that they're being sold that this is an exact copy of their pet, and it's not.
And for the
So-
first decade, that's what people were being sold on, and it has come out so bad against that people, they now, like I went to their websites to check on this, and they are now, I don't know if they're required to, but they now at least say it is just a genetic copy. That is all we can guarantee. I wonder how many times they were getting sued because this was not the exact.
So they're just providing a shell,
Yep.
essentially.
They're providing a body, a grown body.
And then how you re-raise your animal and whatever
Yep.
new environmental conditions will make up its
And it is
quote-unquote new
impossible to
personality.
raise something the exact same way twice.
True.
Okay. I
And
have
it might have some mannerisms that are like, oh, my cat, the original cat used to do the same thing. You know, or the
Yep.
original dog used to do the same thing, but they're not.
You know, it's like if you could clone your grandmother, and
Yeah.
we're getting even more emotional. Okay, I could clone my grandma. She died. I miss her. I want her to be alive again. Okay, well they're bringing back that body. She's growing up in a completely different environment, and she's now no longer your grandmother. She's your niece, nephew, child, something like that. It's not the same. It's not the same individual at all. Completely different.
Oh shit, my grandma being raised with a cell phone.
Right?
That's terrifying.
I guess the follow-up issue, and I promised myself I wouldn't do this, but we've brought up meat and other things several times,
Mhm.
like as a meat replacement. What if clones purely exist as parts?
I
That's
do
enough.
not understand why people would go through that when you could literally just grow a part. We can grow a heart. We can grow an ear. We can grow a finger. Why grow the
So
entire
has
body?
science basically sidestepped the ethical question, is what I'm asking.
Pretty
I mean, we're
much.
still gonna get some ethics involved in that, right? Because
Yeah.
theoretically, you could just keep replacing parts of yourself.
Yes, I
Right,
See,
but,
I don't-
there's
yeah.
I think there's a psychological difference between, I'll use a really bad movie, The Island,
Yes.
with a Michael Bay,
Yeah.
long forgotten Michael Bay
Right,
movie.
right.
There's
Think
a
it's
difference
forgotten.
between
we knew what you're talking about.
I grew a heart in a lab, and I have a clone of myself that exists just to die at random when I need a liver transplant.
Yeah, those
exactly.
are
One
two
of those
very
bothers me
different
more.
things.
Like, you know.
Right, but have we gotten to the point where science has kind of sidestepped that pretty common sci-fi trope of an ethical question?
And just for my clarification, so like, are you saying right now in the science world that if I had an unlimited supply of money, I can clone my liver, my heart, whatever?
Again, it's not commercially available,
We
but it's
understand.
researching being done.
Yes,
Okay.
we understand how, and we have grown organs.
Mhm.
Whether we could grow your organ to the right specifications in the right amount of time, the technology is not quite there,
We're working on it though.
but it will be.
So it sounds like I would much rather have
And here's the
17 clones
thing,
of myself.
is it's so much cheaper to grow a heart as a heart than it is to grow an individual, feed them, keep them sheltered, keep them in healthy,
Well,
prime
I mean, all the
condition,
things
and
we're
then
talking about are extreme high costs.
Yeah.
These are things that won't affect people like me who are always going to be on a public teacher's salary.
Yeah.
And
This doesn't
I just
affect
said I have
me.
an unlimited amount of money, so I own my own.
well,
private
but even
facility.
then, like a company trying to make money, they're going to do it at the cheapest possible, right? They're just going to be like, all right, we're just going to grow a
I
literal
mean,
heart.
your thought would be like, I could have 17 clones of myself, and anytime I need a body part, I can have it,
Pop,
right?
done.
But what's to stop them from having every single type of your body parts that you needed in a jar? You know,
Yeah.
just waiting for you need one. So, and that would be cheaper than having to feed
Way
17
cheaper.
people,
That's what
right?
I'm saying.
it
Like,
would be easier just to
But
have.
is that jar specimen thing happening?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That is more
No,
readily happening than the whole person thing.
No,
Okay.
I'm saying
so
we-
there's our answer.
you can actually go read primary literature about grown organs. People have done it already.
Okay.
It has happened.
And the cool thing they're doing with cancer with that is that you're basically getting to take your cells, put them in another creature, treat the cancer in like a mouse, and then be like, it's like specialized, we're calling it personalized medicine, right? So what they're doing is they're taking no one person's individual cancer is the same. So me and you could both have lung cancer, and what's wrong with you in causing cancer and what's wrong with me in causing cancer are usually not the same thing. So what they're doing is they're taking your cancer, putting it into a lab rat, and then treating it in the lab rat, and then they can go back and treat it in you, right? So they're saving the whole, irradiating yourself and, doing treatments that don't work by specializing
So
in
trial and
treating.
error on the rat rather than trial and error on the human.
Correct. And because there's never going to be one universal cure for cancer, because every cancer is different. All lung cancers are in some way fundamentally different. So they're trying to make it a more personalized thing. And that's what we're seeing as we're going forward with cancer medicine. So you'll probably see a lot more of, things being cloned to replace things that are broken. That's my guess.
All right, so let's go ahead and kind of wrap this one up. So biologically, yeah, cloning is real. It's been real. We can do it. We're getting better at it. But morally and ethically, I think we're all kind of on the same page, but maybe we should just go around it individually. I think that ethically we should go forward with cloning research, but also ethically, I do not think that it is worth cloning your pet or cloning another human being for that matter at all. So, Sebastian?
I think it's pretty cool that our sci-fi dreams are coming true, because cloning has been in the sci-fi world for a long time. But yeah, I don't care to clone my cat. I'll just pick one up from the shelter.
Yeah, and I'm talking even if I could clone my dog for free, I would go pick one up in the shelter instead.
Yeah,
because
I
it's
know.
not my dog.
Yeah.
You can't bring a pet back from the dead.
It's a chapter in my life. Time to move on to a next chapter.
Okay, Chris.
I'm probably the most undecided of the group in that I probably don't have any interest in myself ever getting a pet, but the actual ethical decision of others, I tend to have I can have my own belief and let others have their own as long as it doesn't hurt me attitude towards life, but I'm kind of undecided on a lot of the other stuff. I just like asking questions.
Yeah, and I'm completely with you. I think that, if other people want to clone your pet, as long as you understand you're not getting an exact copy, more power to you. Have fun with your $50,000 to $100,000 gone. But for me, you can't bring them back from the dead. I don't think I'd ever want to do that. But I am excited for what this means as we move forward and the implications in science and what we're going to do.
Yeah. As a scientist, I'm super giddy.
Yeah.
And I absolutely think we should kind of relax our restrictions on cloning research. Again, if not for just being able to say we can clone a heart to replace your congestive heart failure. We can clone a finger to repair the drunken damage you did on on Independence Day.
Yeah, I think we're getting there. We're
Yeah.
getting there, definitely. We've seen some crazy things like growing hands and stuff like that.
Ears
So
on
ears
rats
on
and stuff.
rats and hands, and so we're getting there.
A
It's
beating
just-
heart out of a plant.
Yeah.
That one was really trippy.
Really, all I care about cloning is Jurassic Park to be real. I've been working my whole life to become a real-life raptor trainer and become Chris Pratt.
You may have some problems.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
I know.
Have you heard the best theory about Jurassic Park?
No,
The
but
best theory is that they weren't cloning dinosaurs, that it was all an elaborate trick, that they knew that it wasn't a clone of dinosaurs, and that it was a genetic mismatch, and they brought the people there to see how they could trick them into thinking it was clones.
I just want
Bad
dinosaurs
science.
to come back.
All right. So anyway, thanks for joining us on the Basement Lab podcast. Discusses science, pet cloning.
Thanks for our guest.